This was the year of
Obamacare.
I apologize.
And there was that other terrible thing that happened.
Government shutdown.
Which could put the baby panda at risk.
Did you notice the government shutdown?
No, I didn't notice anything.
I did notice that spending and debt kept going up. And poor people felt the most pain.
Detroit is broke, bankrupt.
And our government spied on us and lied about it.
Nobody is listening to your telephone calls.
And many politicians are eager to go to war.
This is not the time to be silent spectators.
The left was eager to pass more gun control.
Newtown.
Columbine.
Some in both parties moved to further centralize education.
What we really need are clear goals. With the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase.
And as usual, they passed a zillion new rules.
This is just what you see here, just the federal part.
That's right. If you wanted to get state, county, and city laws, you need to rent a bigger building. America was conceived as a sea of liberty. We're now a sea of government power with ever-shrinking islands of liberty.
But the good news was that this year brought more calls for liberty.
Why are they in my kitchen? Why are they looking through my books?
Even a filibuster for it.
I will not sit quietly and let him shred the Constitution.
And this TV channel got a new show about liberty.
This is The Independence.
The good, the bad, the ugly of 2013. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Was 2013 a good year for freedom? Tonight, our all-star panel tackles that question. David Bowes of the Cato Institute, Sabrina Schaeffer of the Independent Women's Forum, and Gillespie of Reason TV. So the big story now is Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Many people really believed it would cover more people with more insurance and still be affordable, cheaper. I mean, how could that be? Magically, we'd get more stuff for less. Now some of the truth has come out. Prices are up. Some people lost coverage. The Cato Institute predicted that. So,
that's right.
You happy?
Yes, we're happy to have been proved right. Look, everybody knows you can't have the government, at least they should know, you can't have government central planning create more things for more people and have it cost less. We could have more stuff for less money if we made people consumers of their own health care and they had some skin in the game, if they had their own, if they were paying out of pocket for these things. But since we're not doing that, we're moving away from it. Of course it's going to get more expensive. And what's happened so far...
Wait a second. People don't get that. People say, oh, these private insurance companies, they make a profit. And by having government mandate that the profit isn't too much and organize things better, that will be cheaper for all.
Profit is not where your payment is going. You're going to cover the whole process. And when people are not personally invested in what they're buying, so they don't actually care how much the hospital room costs and how much the doctor...
Which happens with all insurance.
And it goes up. Which happens, well, certainly with all health insurance. It means that there's no incentive to keep costs down. Well, and then we get this.
My biggest concern about Obamacare is as bad and as disastrous as the rollout of the healthcare website is, if history is correct, this is probably as good as Obamacare is going to get. When you look at Social Security or Medicare, those programs were relatively efficient in doing stuff early on. Now, 50, 70, 80 years later, we see they're bankrupt and they're bankrupting the rest of the country. So enjoy it now because Obamacare is not going to get better.
I think the sort of silver lining to Obamacare is that more and more Americans are understanding now that until they own and control those health care dollars, we will not have efficiency in health care, we will not have better care, we will not have transparency.
Many celebrities campaigned for Obamacare and promoted the administration's Get Covered campaign. One actress went topless to encourage people to sign up. Some made videos. Here's one with Olivia Wilde.
If you're sick, insurance can't limit your benefits cap.
Obamacare!
If you can't afford it, the government will actually give you money to help pay for it.
Obamacare!
Yippee! And celebrities don't realize that they're asking their young fans to sign up to pay for geezers like me.
It's so easy to fall for this snapshot view of the world. If people don't have health care, let's give them health care. And who can do that? The government, because they have all the money in the world.
I do think the disastrous rollout of Obamacare has really kind of woken up a lot of younger people to understand that Obamacare is just one more case of generational theft that is going on, where it is people like Obama who's, on the wrong side of 50, and it's like Medicare, it's like Social Security. These are systems that were put into place for good reasons, but are screwing young people, poor young people, and their future.
To pay for me.
In order to pay for
I appreciate
people.
what you guys are doing.
I hope you enjoy. Just spend it wisely.
Let's move on to government spending. This year we had another partial government shutdown, and the media suggested America might not survive.
A government shutdown will slash the zoo's operations, which could put the baby panda at risk.
It's pathetic. It's not responsible.
Nancy Pelosi says the budget has already been cut to the bone.
The cupboard is there. There's no more cuts to make.
The cupboard is bare?
We always get into this debate of what should we cut, and it detracts from the larger picture, because in the end, that's not really what's dragging us down with our national debt. It's the entitlement spending. And research that we conducted actually found that there's wide appeal among the public for entitlement spending and for spending restraints, not cuts, but just to spend the same this year as we did last year. And I think if the politicians actually thought about it in those terms, they would have a policy win and a political win.
As inflation goes up, you're not going to raise my Social Security payment?
Well, I think there is going to be some realistic,
people are going to scream.
But I think actually people want to see that the entitlements have means testing. I think people realize that now as people are investing more in 401ks and elsewhere, that we don't need to have that reliance on our heavily run government entitlement program.
Yeah, this is, Social Security is not a retirement plan. It is a ripoff that takes money from relatively young poor people and gives it to relatively...
What do you mean it's a ripoff? Say the older people I talk to. I paid into that system all my life.
Yeah, well, then you are not getting a payout that is tied to what you put in. It's so bad that people are starting to wake up to it.
Well, I hope they're waking up to it. When I talk to people on the streets, some do say government is too big. Great. But then I find it upsetting when I ask them, well, so what would you cut? They don't know.
Oh my, I don't know, you can't cut education.
You can't cut health care, I don't think. I'm not sure what else you can cut.
I do want to point out a few people on the street were quick to name things government should cut.
Education and spending and social programs.
Really? What about the people who need them?
That's what the state's for.
You don't want to pay for my health care?
No, sorry.
What would you cut?
Anything not authorized by the Constitution, we eliminate.
What would happen to the poor people?
Well, I'm a poor person. I would eat. I would find a way to eat.
Sabrina, I haven't heard people say this until this decade. This is a new concept.
It's actually really fantastic, because one of the big things that doesn't come out of this conversation about the government spending is that they crowd out private institutions, private charities that otherwise would come in and help people in need. Of course we want it to be do it alone society. We want to help people in need. And these people on the street are recognizing that. They're saying, hey, the local church is a much better option for helping people who are in need.
Next topic, NSA spying. All three of you say this is one of the biggest stories of the year. But I just don't get it. Something must be wrong with me. I mean, I assumed spying was going on. I assume my political enemies somehow read my emails. The stuff flies through the air. I assume my 16-year-old neighbor can pick it up. I made this list of 100 things I hate more about my government than NSA spying. After I put this up on Facebook, libertarians trashed me, called me disgusting. A lino means libertarian in name only. So please educate me. What am I missing, Nick?
I think you are particularly cynical about government. And of course, it's true that libertarians generally, they think the worst of government. They think the worst of centralized power to begin with. So you're in a rare place. The reason why the Edward Snowden revelations about the NSA or about broad-based, wide-scale surveillance by the government of virtually every transaction, every interaction that you're having freaked people out is because that's not what the government has been saying to them. Barack Obama and other people in his administration have point of fact said, we are not looking at your phone calls. We're not looking at your internet browsers. We're not doing any of that. It turned out to be wrong. These are things that outrage people because it is such a disconnect between the public face of government and what it actually does. That's why
more outrageous than the drug war?
One of the points is most of us don't use drugs, and so we think the drug war doesn't affect us that much. We all drive cars, have email, have telephones, so suddenly we've discovered they're spying on all of us. It isn't just terrorists, it isn't just foreign leaders. I don't think Americans did understand that, and that's why there's been this huge eruption about it. Maybe it's significant.
Huge eruption?
Well, there's
I think there's been a pretty huge eruption, certainly among journalists who have been putting it on the front pages for a long time, and certainly among all the wired citizens in the country. Lots of internet outrage. Now, has it cost anybody an election? Well, we haven't had an election since this came out, but has it cost the government a lot of the trust that it had built up? Yeah.
Gallup has found that an all-time high of Americans, it's something like 65% of independents believe that the government has too much power. I think that is directly attributable not only to the demonstrable failures of various government policies, but these disclosures. People are very, very bothered by this.
Before there was sort of the fear of the military-industrial complex. Now there's the realization that there's a military information complex.
But people do want to kill us. And it's not like there's some spy who's just listening to my phone call. These are big data sweeps. And they might catch a terrorist. Let's say they are.
Ultimately, we have too much data, right? We need to have targeted searches of people who are actually threatening Americans. We can't just, throw a net over all Americans and hope to find somebody who's bad.
You know what one of the causes of the American Revolution was? It was the writs of assistance. Writs of assistance is another name for general warrants. And they put it in the Constitution that you can't do that anymore. You have to get a specific warrant. You have to say, we have reason to believe that in this address there is terrorist-related activity.
But
and now they've
coming
decided
into
they
my
can
house.
do a dragnet.
They're just the machine says, oh, this guy's talking to Abdul a lot.
They're looking at where your car goes, where your phone calls go, where
and
your
this is also
go.
important that even, and of course always wrapping it in the shroud of government secrecy, so we can't tell you. You have to trust us. You just found out we've been lying to you for a very long time about whether or not we're spying on you, but you have to trust them when we say we won't abuse it. The cases that people in Congress like Dianne Feinstein and people in the NSA and whatnot brought forward to say, look, this is how we use the data. Inevitably, those cases do not rely on mass data sweeps, but on old-style police and intelligence work where you infiltrate a known terrorist cell, find an email address, and then start tracking that. It's never about this, oh, we're going to collect everything, run it through, UNIVAC, Brainiac 65, and then, well, there's your terrorist wrapped up with a bow.
And they're asking us to trust them as they repeatedly lie and then say, oh, okay, well, I wasn't telling the truth then, but now I'll tell you we don't do any more than this. And then a week later it's, okay, well, it's not any more than this. So we know that they're serial liars about this.
If you'd like to keep this conversation going, please go to Facebook or Twitter. Use that hashtag good, bad, ugly. Let people know what you think. And later in the show,
this is not the time to be silent spectators to slaughter.
We can stop children from being gassed to death.
Children were gassed to death, Syria, children and adults, and we did not intervene, though our political leaders, as you heard, said we must. So what happened? We're back with our panel, David Bose, Sabrina Schaeffer, Nick Gillespie. What happened?
What happened was the country didn't want to go to another war in a Muslim country. And so the President and the Secretary of State and a lot of Republican leaders made this argument. And as you say, it's a compelling case. There's terrible things happening in Syria. And the President said, I don't need congressional authorization to do this. And then there was enough feedback, there was enough pushback on that. He said, I'm going to go to Congress and ask. And once he said that, it was pretty clear Congress was listening to the people. The people didn't want to go into this war, and so they just kind of dropped it.
Rand Paul happened, that his pushback, his leading the fight against the intervention really gave Congress a spine for the first time, arguably, since Korea.
Congress hasn't voted on these.
Yeah, and they've always been kind of going along to get along, and that ended. And people are like, you know what, 12 years in Iraq, 12 years in Pakistan or Afghanistan and everywhere else, good luck with this one. We're not supporting it.
Well, Sabrina, you point out we have clear interests in Syria.
Yeah, I think we do have clear interests. That's the easy part, right? We want to keep the chemical weapons out of the hands of terrorists. We don't want to allow Syria to become Al-Qaeda's, stomping ground. We don't want Iran to have a neighboring partner. The harder part is, what do you do about that? We have a tyrant on one side, and we have a rebellion that's been compromised by Al-Qaeda on the other side. What is it for the United States to do?
And we decided not to do it, and you say, good, all of you.
Right.
Probably.
And probably. Next, gun control. After the Newtown school shooting, there was another big push for gun control. Here in New York City, my friends, my own wife, said, how could you not say there shouldn't be more rules against these terrible weapons? And yet, no new legislation resulted. So, what happened?
I think what happened is that people recognize that you don't make good laws in the wake of a tragedy, which Sandy Hook certainly was.
People recognize that?
I think so. That's why legislatures, yes. In this case, as you were saying, major gun control legislation did not go forward at the national level.
The media doesn't recognize it. They're saying, pass it, pass it.
But they don't.
Are you saying that people are smarter than the media?
Yeah,
maybe, yes.
But the fact of the matter is what people understand is that over the past 20 years or more, there have been liberalized gun laws. More people can own guns and carry them in more circumstances across the country. At the same time, gun violence has gone down dramatically.
Guns are a very cultural issue. East Coast elites, liberal elites, they don't like guns. They don't know guns. They haven't been around guns. Out in the heartland of America, what they call flyover country, lots of people use guns. Mostly, they use them responsibly. They can give them to their teenage kids and teach them how to go hunting. And a lot of the Bloomberg Hollywood axis, they don't understand that. And so they're surprised when these terrible things happen, and it doesn't cause the American people to say we need to crack down on guns. In fact, opposition to stricter gun control has been going steadily up in Gallup polls the last 20 years.
2013 was also the year when a major American city declared bankruptcy, and I fear Detroit's just a little ahead of the rest of the country. Sabrina?
One of the problems for Detroit was that you had politicians and union leaders who were sort of, each rubbing each other's backs, right? The unions kept the politicians in business. The politicians then rewarded them with cushy pensions. But this was not a sustainable path, and I hope that there is a lesson for many other cities out there.
Yeah, in Detroit, they kept electing politicians who said they were going to fix it now. Instead, well, CNN got this one right.
They turned City Hall into a den of bribes and kickbacks, making themselves rich.
The former mayor charged taxpayers for 54 trips, limo rentals, nightclub charges, and so forth. But that's unusual. Some 50 cities have gone broke since 1980. Usually it's about just giving to the workers.
You got the politicians who get money from the unions, and you've got the unions who get money from the politicians, and they sit down and engage in hard bargaining, and that's why Detroit is the canary in the mine for a whole lot of American cities and states who are so far in debt with their public pension plans.
It catches up with people, and hopefully other cities will learn from Detroit and mend their ways before they actually go the route of bankruptcy.
You pointed out that in cities and state governments there's this Groupon attitude that you can get $1 but only spend 60 cents.
Well, as long as you're only paying 60 cents and you're getting $1 of perceived goods out of that, of course you're going to want more. This is happening at the federal level where the government literally borrows 40 cents of every dollar that it spends, and it happens at the local level. It shows up quicker. The local places run dry quicker because they can't print money. But we've got to get out of that mentality. You cannot get a bargain forever.
Let Detroit be a lesson. Later in the show, I'll put on my Santa hat and tell you who was naughty and nice this year. But next, some good news about the year. And also, we ask you to vote on what you want our panelists to discuss. We'll tell you which topics got the most votes when we return. On Facebook, we ask our audience to vote for the topic that you'd like to hear our panelists discuss. The winner, the overwhelming winner for some reason, I'm not sure about, Common Core. Most of America doesn't even know what that is, but they should. It's the government's plan to make sure every government school has the same standards.
That's where the Common Core state standards come in. With the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase.
Sounds like a good thing.
Really? Why? Centralization, conformity? All children are different. States have different populations with different needs, but a small group of elitists in Washington want to impose one set of rules on schools in 15,000 school districts across the country.
This is a long-term plan to centralize and kind of...
Don't we need a standard test so you can see Is the kids learning?
Well, we have standard tests. We have the SAT. We have the NAEP. There are plenty of standard tests. And besides which, you say standard test. There's no standard test for what a TV show should look like except the market. There's no standard test for what a smartphone should be like except what people are willing to buy.
The market.
In the workplace, we're allowing people flexibility to telecommute, to have shared jobs and entertainment. People buy and watch what they want when they want to watch it. Why would it be? This is so old-fashioned. Why would we then suddenly have an education?
Because government knows best.
Right.
Don't you know that's centralized? Wait a sec. Finally, let's go to the good news this year. You say there's some stuff we should celebrate. David, you start.
Well, there was progress this year on marijuana freedom. A couple of states started implementing actual decriminalization. There was progress toward marriage equality. That was a good thing, and both of these things did not come from Washington. They came from the people and from the states. And around the world, economic freedom in the world continued to increase. Not in the United States, but there's a 30-year trend.
We fell in the ranking down to 17th.
17th over the past decade. But in the world as a whole, there's been a slow, steady progress over the past 30 years toward more economic freedom.
Hooray for the world. Sabrina.
Well, despite the Common Core story, I think actually there were a lot of wins for educational freedom. We saw new tax credit programs, education tax credit programs, and the expansion of tax credit programs in numerous states, Alabama, Indiana, Iowa, and others. We saw education saving accounts expanded in other states, voucher programs expanded. So I think that there's actually a lot of good news in the education front.
For me, the single biggest story that is a true game changer is the Edward Snowden revelations, and it builds on things that were done earlier by Anonymous and WikiLeaks and other agencies. There's a different grammar to running governments now. You will be found out when you're lying to people and when you're saying one thing publicly and doing one thing privately. And I look forward to when this type of revelation is layered into things like the Department of Agricultural subsidy programs. We're at the very beginning age that is going to bring true transparency, and it's going to leave a lot of government people shaking in their boots.
And one other good result of that is that the polls now show, Pew says only 19% of people say they trust the government to do what is right just about always or most of the time. And the reporters wring their hands, oh, we're losing faith in government. I say, yippee, they're finally figuring it out.
I was just thinking how only 22% of Americans say that they identify with the Tea Party, which I think is probably a little bit understated because it's being demonized in the press right now. But I actually feel some comfort in that, knowing that almost a quarter of the population wants to identify with a movement whose goal is to rein in government. So that gives me some hope going to 2014.
Well, thank you, Nick, Sabrina, David. Coming up, some new ideas from Senator Rand Paul.